The side door hadn't been opened in years. Cobwebs stretched across the frame like stitching over a wound. And yet, someone inside that pitch-black house wanted me to walk up to it, alone, in the pouring rain, with no one around for miles. But let me back up. I'd been delivering pizzas since the week after my 17th birthday. It wasn't glamorous, but it beat mopping floors or folding clothes at some retail store. The money was decent, the work was mindless, and most nights I just cruised around town listening to music, dropping off boxes, collecting tips. Routine. Predictable. Safe. Weeknights blurred together. Same roads, same regulars, same lukewarm small talk at the door. Weekends were a different animal. Random addresses. Strange hours. Our shop kept deliveries running until 2 a.m. on Fridays and Saturdays, which meant I was often out on empty roads well past midnight, navigating neighborhoods I'd never been to before. That particular Saturday, a heavy storm had rolled in around dinner time and never left. Thunder grumbled low and constant, and rain hammered the streets in thick sheets. For most businesses, weather like that kills foot traffic. For us, it was the opposite. Nobody wanted to step outside, so the orders flooded in. My phone didn't stop buzzing with new deliveries until almost midnight. Then things finally slowed. I parked behind the shop and walked inside for the first time in hours, shaking rain off my jacket. The kitchen smelled like dough and burnt cheese. A couple of the older guys, Mario, who was pushing 40, and Dale, who never seemed to actually leave the building, were leaning against the counter, talking about football. They barely acknowledged me. The other delivery driver, Rick, was sitting on a milk crate near the back, scrolling his phone. He'd been parked there for at least an hour, doing absolutely nothing. So naturally, when the next order pinged, guess who they sent? I didn't argue. I never did. I just grabbed the box, checked the receipt, and headed out. The address was on a road I'd never heard of. Calder Hollow Lane. My GPS estimated 19 minutes. Deep into the wooded outskirts east of town, where houses sat far back from the road behind walls of pine and oak, connected by long gravel driveways that disappeared into darkness. I didn't mind the drive. Honestly, I was planning to take the scenic route home afterward, burn some clock, maybe avoid getting sent out again before close. The rain had softened to a steady drizzle, and the roads were completely deserted. At that hour, it felt like I had the whole town to myself. On any other night, I would have called it peaceful. The GPS led me off the main road and down a narrow 2-lane street with no streetlights. The trees pressed in tight on either side. After a quarter mile, it told me to turn, and I pulled onto a gravel driveway that crunched under my tires as I crept forward. The driveway was long, unnervingly long, and at the end of it sat a large, aging colonial-style house. Every window was dark, not dimly lit, not flickering with a TV somewhere inside. Completely, absolutely dark. The kind of dark that makes a house look abandoned. I put the car in park and left the headlights on, angled toward the front porch, while I reached into the passenger seat to grab the pizza. As I leaned over, something caught my eye. Movement on the second floor. A curtain shifted in one of the upstairs windows, just barely, just enough to notice. Someone was watching me. I see that sometimes on deliveries, people peek out to check if it's the driver. It's normal. But this time, the darkness behind the curtain was so total that I couldn't make out even the faintest silhouette. Just the fabric moving, then going still. Like a breath held. I told myself it was nothing, grabbed the box, got out. The rain had picked up again, cold pinpricks against my neck as I jogged toward the porch. That's when I stopped. There was already a pizza box sitting on the porch steps. It wasn't from our shop. The logo on top belonged to Rinaldi's, a small place across town I'd only vaguely heard of. The box was warped and soggy, the cardboard dark with moisture, like it had been sitting out in the rain for a long time. An hour at least, maybe more. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had brought it inside. But someone was home. I'd just seen the curtain move. I stepped around the abandoned box and knocked on the front door. 3 firm knocks. Immediately, and I mean the instant my knuckles left the wood, I heard something shift inside. A creak. Weight transferring on old floorboards. Close. Very close to the door. Then silence. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. Rain tapped against the porch roof above me in an uneven rhythm. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number listed on the order. Through the door, just inches away, it felt like I heard a phone start ringing. That tinny, muffled vibration of a ringtone behind a thin barrier. Someone was standing directly on the other side of that door. They didn't answer the phone. They didn't open the door. They just stood there. My stomach tightened. The rain suddenly sounded louder. The darkness around the house suddenly felt deeper. I glanced back at my car, headlights still cutting through the drizzle, and then at that soggy pizza box from Rinaldi's. A thought started forming in my mind, an ugly thought, but before it could fully take shape, a voice came from behind the door. Door's jammed. Can't get it open. A woman's voice. But wrong somehow. Strained, gravelly. Like she was forcing the words out through clenched teeth. Or like she was reading from a script she hadn't rehearsed. Go around to the side entrance, she said. Left side of the house. I didn't respond right away. I just stood there, holding the pizza box, rain dripping off the brim of my cap. Okay, I finally said. Sure. I stepped off the porch and walked along the left side of the house. There was no awning here, no overhang, nothing. The rain soaked through my jacket in seconds. My sneakers sank into soft, muddy grass. The glow from my headlights faded the farther I moved from the front of the house, until I was navigating almost entirely by the pale light of my phone screen. The side door was set into a small concrete stoop, one step up from the ground. The moment I saw it, every alarm in my head went off at once. The door looked like it hadn't been touched in years, maybe longer. Grime coated the handle. A thick curtain of old spider webs stretched across the upper corner of the frame, undisturbed. The light fixture above it was dead, not just off, but broken. The bulb shattered with jagged glass still in the socket. Leaves and debris had piled against the base of the door like a small drift. Nobody used this entrance. Nobody had used it in a very long time. So why was she sending me here? I stood on that stoop, rain hammering my shoulders, and listened. Inside the house, nothing. No footsteps approaching. No locks clicking. No floorboards creaking. Just the rain and the wind and the sound of my own breathing getting faster. Then I felt it. That primal animal sensation that crawls up the back of your neck when you're being watched. Not from the house this time. From behind me. From the trees. I turned slowly. The yard stretched out into a wall of black woods, and I couldn't see more than 15 feet into them. But something was out there. I felt it with a certainty that bypassed logic entirely and went straight to my bones. I set the pizza box down on the stoop. Then I walked. Not ran, walked, back along the side of the house, through the mud, into the glow of my headlights. I got in the car, locked the doors, put it in reverse, and I didn't breathe properly until I was back on a paved road with streetlights above me. On the drive back, I kept thinking about that Rinaldi's box, soggy, untouched, sitting on the porch of a house where someone was clearly home but refused to open the door. Another delivery driver had come to that house earlier that night. He'd knocked, probably waited, probably felt the same creeping wrongness I did. But he left the pizza on the porch and walked away, which meant whatever they were trying to do hadn't worked the first time. The first driver hadn't gone around to the side of the house. So they ordered again, from a different shop, a different driver who wouldn't recognize the address, a different kid who might follow instructions. The woman's voice, the phone ringing right behind the door, the ancient, unused side entrance, the darkness, the trees. I've thought about it hundreds of times since that night, played it over and over, trying to construct some innocent explanation, a paranoid shut-in, a broken door, a coincidence with the other pizza. But no version of it makes sense without something ugly at the center. I still work at the shop. 8 months now and counting. I've delivered to sketchy apartments, to drunk guys who answer the door shirtless, to houses where dogs lunge at the screen. None of it has ever come close to what I felt standing at that side door in the rain. But here's the thing that keeps me up some nights. I never told my manager the real reason I came back with the pizza. I just said nobody answered. He shrugged, logged it as a failed delivery, and tossed the pizza in the back for the crew to eat. He never called the customer, never followed up, never flagged the address, which means it's still in the system, which means the next time someone at that house places an order on some rainy Saturday past midnight, when the roads are empty and the woods are dark, some other kid is going to pull up that long gravel driveway, see a dark house with no lights on, and hear a voice behind a door telling him to go around to the side. And maybe that kid won't listen to the feeling. Maybe that kid will open the door. I found the satellite messenger sitting on the forest floor, its orange casing glowing faintly in the beam of my flashlight. No backpack near it, no tent, no owner, just the device placed there like bait on a hook. And then I heard the footsteps sprinting directly at me from the darkness. But I need to tell this from the beginning. Almost 2 years ago, I was working as a park ranger in a vast wilderness area. Hundreds of thousands of acres of dense, old-growth forest that most people never bothered visiting. I won't say which one. Other parks in the state drew the crowds, the Instagram hikers, the families with coolers and golden retrievers. Ours attracted a different kind of visitor, the ones who wanted to disappear into the backcountry for days at a time with nothing but a pack and a trail map. Serious outdoors people, or sometimes nobody at all, because visitation was low, our staffing matched. On any given night, there might be 3 or 4 rangers spread across the entire park, each stationed at small outpost lodges miles apart from one another. My lodge was barely more than a cabin. A wood-burning stove, a desk, a cot, and a heavy-duty radio bolted to the wall for communicating with the other stations and, if needed, emergency services. My shifts were irregular. Some days I'd clock out at midnight. Others, I wouldn't leave until 3 or 4 in the morning. The work itself was mostly routine: trail maintenance, campsite inspections, occasionally assisting a hiker who twisted an ankle or gotten turned around. Nothing that ever made my pulse spike. The forest was vast and dark and ancient, but I'd grown comfortable in it. It was my office. That particular afternoon, I'd ridden my ATV about 6 miles up a backcountry trail to inspect a remote campground tucked into a valley. The trail narrowed and steepened about 2/3 of the way in, so I parked the ATV and hiked the remaining distance on foot. The campground was empty when I arrived, not a single tent. No fire rings still warm, no boot prints in the mud. Just silence and the smell of wet pine needles. I spent a couple of hours cleaning the site, checking the bare boxes, logging the conditions. By the time I finished, the sun was slipping behind the ridgeline. I hiked back to my ATV in fading light, then rode carefully down to the lodge as full darkness settled over the forest. About an hour after I got back, rain started falling. Not unusual. Storms were frequent in that part of the state, especially that time of year. I brewed a pot of coffee, hung my damn jacket by the stove, and sat down at the desk to write up my campground report. The rain drummed steadily on the tin roof. The radio hummed quietly with occasional static. It felt like every other night. Then, around 11, the radio crackled to life. Another ranger, Stevens, stationed about 12 miles south, was asking if I was there. I picked up the handset and confirmed. His voice had that careful, measured tone rangers use when they don't want to alarm anyone, but something is clearly bothering them. He asked if I'd seen anyone at the campground I'd inspected. I told him no, not a soul, no tents, no gear, no signs of recent activity whatsoever. There was a pause, a long one, 30 seconds of dead air filled with nothing but rain and static. When Stevens came back, he sounded reluctant, almost apologetic. He said the station had received a satellite SOS ping, the kind sent from a personal locator beacon or a Garmin-type messenger device. The coordinates placed the signal roughly 2 miles up, the same trail I'd hiked that afternoon. He said he wouldn't normally ask, but I was the closest ranger by a wide margin. Everyone else was at least an hour out, probably longer in this weather. He needed me to go check it out. Then he added something that was supposed to make me feel better but didn't. There had been no follow-up message. No text. No second ping. Usually, he said, when they got a lone SOS with no accompanying communication, it turned out to be an accidental button press. Someone's pack shifting, compressing the device, triggering the signal without the person even knowing. Happened all the time. But protocol was protocol. Someone had to go look. I pulled on my rain jacket, strapped my headlamp over my hood, grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight, clipped the walkie to my chest, and stepped out into the storm. The ATV was useless in rain like this. The trail turned to soup within the first half-mile on a good day. In a downpour like this, I'd bury the wheels before I even reached the trailhead, so I went on foot. The walk took about 45 minutes. For a 2-mile hike in those conditions, pitch black, rain hammering sideways, the trail barely distinguishable from the surrounding mud and undergrowth, that was fast. But I pushed it because something about the whole situation had settled uneasily in my chest. Not the SOS itself. Those were routine. It was the location. That trail had been completely deserted just hours ago. No one was out there. I was certain of it. So who sent the signal? I reached the approximate area Stevens had given me and started sweeping my flashlight in wide arcs through the trees. Rain turned the beam into a cone of silver static. Visibility maybe 40 or 50 feet on a good sweep. The forest was alive with the sound of water, dripping from branches, rushing in small rivulets across the trail, pooling in every depression. I kept walking, scanning left and right, calling out in the standard way. Park ranger, anyone out here? If you need assistance, call out or move toward my light. Nothing, just rain. And then my flashlight swept past something, and I jerked it back. A man was standing 10 feet off the trail. My heart nearly punched through my ribs. He was right there, close enough to hit with a thrown rock. And he was completely still. He was drenched, not like someone caught in the rain, but like someone who had been standing in it for hours without moving. His hair hung in long, dark ropes over his face and shoulders. He wore a thin shirt and pants, no jacket, no rain gear of any kind. His arms hung at his sides. No backpack, no hiking poles, no gear whatsoever. And he was staring directly at me. I steadied myself and called out again, louder this time. Identifying myself as a ranger, I asked if he was hurt, if he needed help, if he was the one who'd sent the SOS signal. He didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't flinch. His expression was difficult to read, somewhere between confusion and something else I couldn't name. His eyes caught the light from my flashlight and reflected it back like an animal's. Flat, unblinking. I noticed again, no gear, no pack, and critically, no satellite messenger. If this was the person who'd sent the SOS, where was the device? Those things are small, but not invisible. You'd clip it to a strap, hold it in your hand, keep it accessible. He had nothing. I took a step forward and gestured toward the trail. Told him my lodge was a couple miles down, that I could get him warm and dry, that we could figure out what was going on. I kept my voice calm, authoritative but not threatening. He bolted, not away from me in a panicked stumble, not sideways in surprise. He turned and sprinted directly into the deep forest with a speed and purpose that made no sense for someone who looked half dead from exposure. Within seconds, the darkness swallowed him completely. I couldn't even hear his footsteps over the rain. I stood there, flashlight pointed at the empty space where he'd been, rain pouring down my face, and felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years of working in that forest. Fear. I keyed my radio and reported to Stevens. Told him I'd found a male individual on the trail. No gear, no identification, appeared disoriented or possibly in a dissociative state, and that he'd fled into the forest when I'd approached. Stevens acknowledged and asked me to hold position while he tried to coordinate with the other stations. I waited on the trail for 2 or 3 minutes, scanning the tree line, listening for any sound beneath the rain. My flashlight beam felt pathetically small against the enormity of the darkness surrounding me. Then Stevens came back on the radio and his voice had changed. "Hold on," he said abruptly. The line went quiet. When he returned a minute later, he told me they just received a second SOS ping, same device ID as the first one. The new coordinates placed it roughly a quarter-mile east of the original signal. East. Deeper into the forest, exactly the direction the man had run. I felt the hair rise on the back of my neck, despite the cold rain running down it. Why would someone flee from a rescue and then immediately send another distress signal? If he was scared, confused, delirious, sure, maybe the running made some kind of sense, but to then stop, pull out a device, and deliberately trigger another SOS? That required awareness, intent. That wasn't the behavior of someone lost and panicking. That was the behavior of someone who wanted me to follow. Stevens seemed to be thinking the same thing, because his next transmission was careful. He told me it was my call. He couldn't order me into the backcountry off trail in a storm like this, especially alone. But he also couldn't rule out the possibility that someone out there genuinely needed help. Maybe someone other than the man I'd seen. Maybe the messenger belonged to another hiker entirely, and this man had found it, or taken it. That last thought is what pushed me forward. What if there was someone else out there, injured, unable to move, relying on that device as their only lifeline, and this man, whoever he was, had it? I stepped off the trail and into the woods. The terrain was brutal. Without the trail's clear path, every step was a negotiation with roots, rocks, mud, and underbrush. My headlamp bounced wildly with each stride, creating a disorienting strobe effect against the rain. I moved slowly, sweeping my flashlight in methodical passes, calling out every 30 seconds. 5 minutes in, my beam caught something on the ground. A small device, orange casing, compact rectangular shape with a rubberized button on the face. A Garmin InReach satellite messenger. I recognized it instantly. Every serious hiker in our park carried one or something like it. It was sitting on a patch of bare earth between two large tree roots. Not dropped, not half buried in mud as it would be if someone had lost it while running. Placed, positioned screen up almost deliberately, like someone wanted it to be found. I crouched down, rain streaming off my hood, and stared at the device. My mind was racing through explanations, and every single one of them ended somewhere I didn't want to go. Then I heard it. Footsteps, fast, coming from my right. I swung the flashlight up and there he was, the same man, charging at me through the trees at a dead sprint. Not stumbling, not calling for help, running at me with his arms slightly forward, fingers spread, his face locked in an expression that wasn't fear or desperation or confusion. It was nothing. His face showed nothing. His eyes were wide open, unblinking against the rain, and absolutely empty. Like the lights were on, but whoever was supposed to be behind them had left a long time ago. He closed the distance in seconds. I threw myself sideways and he crashed past me, his hand raking across my jacket sleeve hard enough to spin me half around. He hit the ground, skidded in the mud, and immediately started scrambling to get back up. For one frozen second, I looked at him, really looked at him, as he clawed at the wet earth, trying to get his footing. His fingers were raw. His nails were cracked and dark with dirt. His feet were bare. I hadn't noticed before, but he wasn't wearing shoes. His soles were torn and blackened. How long had he been out here? I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran. The next 10 minutes were the longest of my life. I crashed through the underbrush in what I desperately hoped was the direction of the trail. Branches whipping across my face, my boots sliding on every wet surface. I keyed the walkie as I ran and told Stevens, in fragments, between gasps, that the man had attacked me, that the whole thing was a setup, that I needed support immediately. I found the trail more by luck than navigation and sprinted down it without looking back. Every shadow between the trees looked like a figure. Every sound behind me could have been footsteps. The rain erased everything. Tracks, sounds, distances, and I had no idea if he was 10 feet behind me or a mile away. I reached the lodge, threw myself inside, and locked the door. Then the deadbolt. Then I shoved the desk against it for good measure. Stevens arrived 11 minutes later. An actual law enforcement officer didn't get there for another 40 minutes after that. By then, the storm was at its worst. Given the conditions and the potential danger, the decision was made to suspend any search until daylight. Nobody was going back into those woods in the dark. Morning came gray and dripping. The rain had softened to a mist. A search team went up the trail and located the Garmin messenger exactly where I'd found it, still sitting on the ground between those two roots, screen up, untouched. They logged it as evidence. But the man was gone. No tracks. The rain had erased everything. No campsite, No discarded clothing, no trace of another person anywhere in the surrounding area. It was as if the forest had simply absorbed him. In the weeks that followed, I learned a few things that made the knot in my stomach tighten rather than loosen. The satellite messenger was registered to a hiker who had completed a solo backpacking trip through the park 3 months earlier. He checked out of the southern trailhead, returned home safely, and, when contacted by investigators, confirmed he still had his messenger, checked his gear closet and everything. Except when he actually looked, it wasn't there. He'd lost it somewhere on the trail months ago and hadn't realized it because he hadn't gone hiking since. So this man in the woods, barefoot, gearless, standing in a rainstorm with empty eyes, had somehow found or taken a lost satellite device, and he'd figured out how to use the SOS function, not to call for help, to call for someone to come to him. I worked at the park for almost exactly 1 more year after that night. Every shift in the dark felt different. Every radio call made my hands tighten around the handset. Every shadow off the trail looked like a figure standing still, watching, waiting for me to get close enough. Nothing else ever happened. No more rogue SOS pings. No more sightings. The incident report was filed, reviewed, and quietly buried under a mountain of bureaucratic indifference. The official conclusion was unidentified individual, likely experiencing a mental health crisis. No further action required. No further action required. I left the service 13 months after that night, told my supervisor it was burnout, told my family it was the hours, never told anyone the real reason, that I couldn't stop replaying the moment I looked into that man's eyes and saw nothing behind them. Not madness, not desperation, just a vast, patient emptiness, like a deep hole covered with a thin layer of leaves. I've tried to move on. Got a desk job in the city, sleep with the lights on more often than I'd like to admit. But sometimes late at night, when the rain picks up and the wind moves through the trees outside my apartment window in just the wrong way, I think about something that still doesn't sit right. They found the messenger. They confirmed no one else was reported missing in the area. They searched the surrounding forest for a full day and found nothing, but they only searched a 1-mile radius from where I'd last seen him. That part stretches for hundreds of miles in every direction. Hundreds of miles of dense, unwatched, unvisited forest where a person could live for months, years, without ever being seen. And the thing about satellite messengers is they store contact history, which means he didn't just know how to send an SOS. He knew what happened when you sent one. He knew someone would come. He knew they'd come alone. And he knew they'd follow the signal deeper into the woods if he moved it far enough off the trail. He'd done this before. I'm almost sure of it. The question that keeps me awake, the one I will never be able to answer, is simple. Did it work the time before me?